So the first part of EMDR therapy is called EMDR Resourcing. And this is where we focus on providing tools and coping strategies for the client before we dive into EMDR processing. In this video, I'm going to outline a dozen or so common resourcing strategies and resourcing tools that can be helpful for you as a client healing from trauma or as a therapist practicing EMDR or curious in learning more about EMDR. Hey everybody, my name's Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I am a certified EMDR practitioner and consultant. And I'm going to introduce you or refamiliarize you with a handful of different common EMDR resources. So when I say the word resources, what I'm talking about are specific coping skills or strategies or positive memories or positive characters or roles that you can tap into to help regulate emotions or stress or triggers or anxiety. So in a separate video on this channel, I highlighted the difference between EMDR resourcing and EMDR processing, which I'm not going to really go into so much in this video. EMDR resourcing is the preparation for EMDR processing. EMDR resourcing is focused on positive memories, positive resources. EMDR processing is focused on painful and traumatic memories. In order to safely get to EMDR processing, we have to first spend some time with EMDR resourcing. EMDR resourcing has really evolved over the years. Initially, there was very little emphasis on resourcing before the processing in the EMDR protocol. And now there's much more emphasis on resourcing the client, ensuring that they have coping skills and that they're stable and have the ability to shift ego states and connect with strengths and positive qualities, adaptive information, before we move into the painful and difficult traumatic memories. So some of the most common resources that are used in EMDR are a safe place, although many people struggle with a safe place. And so there's really been a movement to transition from a safe place to focusing on a memory of a calm state. So this is a time when our nervous system was at ease and in a calm and regulated state. So these are usually the first resources that we cultivate with the client. And in cultivating these resources, we would ask the client to identify either a real or imagined safe place or a memory of when they were experiencing a calm state of mind and body. And we would ask questions to help elicit aspects of that memory. What did it smell like in that moment? Or what do you imagine it would smell like in this safe place? What are the sounds that you remember when you were in that calm state of mind? Or what are the sounds associated with this safe place? What are you seeing? What's around you? What are you noticing in your body? What sensations externally and internally? And so we would ask these different questions to try to evoke the senses and help someone really get in touch with this memory of being in a calm state, or this memory of a safe place, or this imagined safe place. And then we would ask the client to follow our fingers, or to hold the EMDR TheraTappers, or to self-tap bilaterally, and take some time to connect with this memory of being in a calm state of mind and body, or to imagine that they're in this safe place right here, right now. And so just a couple minutes, sometimes even just a couple seconds of imagining being in a safe place, imagining being at the beach, imagining being in the forest on a hiking trail, imagining being on the top of a mountain looking at a beautiful view from your favorite trip in the past. Just a couple seconds or minutes of allowing yourself to go there and being there, imagining being there, usually completely changes how we feel emotionally and how our body feels in terms of body sensations. It has the power to really calm us down, to make us feel at ease, relaxed, relieved, maybe happy or content. And this is essentially the gist of all of the different resources that we're taking some time to distract ourselves or intentionally access and connect to something positive, something nurturing, something protecting, something relaxing. So we have the safe place, the calm state. Oftentimes we'll use some sort of protective figure or some sort of nurturing figure as two additional EMDR resources. Sometimes these are humans in our life, although many times our relationships with humans are complicated. And when we think about the people in our lives, there can be mixed feelings that come up. So we usually advise clients to use archetypal, spiritual, religious, mythological, or fictional characters for their nurturing or protective figures. For example, I've had clients in the past who will choose a religious character. They might choose Jesus, or they might choose Buddha, or they might choose Mary as their nurturing figure, or they might choose a superhero, or they might choose a movie character, or somebody from world history. Malcolm X or Gandalf or Gandhi or somebody from American history as a protective figure. And just like we would for the safe place or the calm state resource, we would inquire and ask questions about this figure that the individual has chosen. What do you imagine that person's voice sounds like? What do you imagine they smell like? What do you imagine shaking their hand or giving them a hug would feel like? And then we would ask them to take a couple minutes while engaging in bilateral stimulation. Take a couple minutes and imagine hanging out with that person and notice what you experience. Imagine hanging out with Gandalf from Lord of the Rings and see if he has any message or suggestion for you about your healing, about your life, about preparing yourself for trauma therapy. And I'm constantly amazed at the new insights and wisdom that clients gain from this type of EMDR resourcing. They'll, imagine hanging out with Gandalf and all of a sudden they'll start smiling, and then, we'll finish the EMDR resourcing and I'll ask them, I noticed you were smiling midway. What happened? What did you imagine? And then they'll tell me like this incredible new insight that they gained, that they imagined Gandalf telling them about their trauma or about their life or about preparing to face their trauma. And it'll be something really profound or meaningful. So protective and nurturing figures are two other types of EMDR resources. Another common EMDR resource is an animal resource. And this could be pet, or this could be an animal, more of an exotic animal or a wild animal, or even a archetypal and fictional animal that the individual feels some sort of connection to. For many people that are seeking EMDR therapy, they've experienced complex trauma and ongoing relational trauma. And relationships with humans can feel complicated. But relationships with animals oftentimes are a lot less complicated. Many times our pets, our dogs, are the best examples of unconditional love and instinctual protection that we'll ever have. And so we might encourage someone to use their pet dog or their pet cat as an EMDR resource and to imagine spending time, imagine replaying a memory of cuddling with their dog or playing with their dog or petting their dog. So the animal could be a real animal, but we want to avoid, using somebody's pet if the pet has died or if the pet is expected to die soon, because that's likely to bring up some grief for the client. We could also use wild animals or more kind of archetypal animals. One of my clients chose a tiger, actually a circle of tigers, as his protective resource and animal resource. And he imagines himself being surrounded by tigers that are facing outward, that are keeping guard and protecting him so that he can let his guard down, so he can relax his nervous system and he can feel a sense of safety. Other clients might choose a more mythological animal like a phoenix or a dragon as their animal resource, which are, have a strong symbolism. Particularly the phoenix is a symbol of growth after trauma. And it's actually what my organization is named after. So when I do my own EMDR resourcing, I'll either use my pet dog as my animal resource, or I'll use the phoenix as an animal resource, a symbolic resource that can help me face my own adversity and heal from trauma. So we got safe place, we've the calm state, we've got protective figures, nurturing figures, we've got the animal. Another really common resource is the container resource. This is where we ask a client to imagine some sort of physical container that they could use to hold and contain memories of trauma, difficult emotions or sensations or triggers related to trauma, so that we can put them inside this container, and that when we're ready, we can come back and open that container up and deal with them one at a time. So many clients will choose something like a lock safe as the container, or a locker, or some sort of box or container. And what we'll do is we'll again ask questions to help elicit different senses related to the container. How big is it? What color is it? How does it open and close? Is it a combination lock, or is it a key lock, or does it have a PIN code? What does the lock feel like when you touch it? How heavy is it? Where are you going to keep this container? We'll ask questions like this to really help someone visualize and imagine this container. And then using bilateral stimulation again, we'll ask the client to imagine opening the container up, putting any difficult emotions or memories or triggers or feelings or anything, negative beliefs, into the container, and closing it up and locking it. And we'll ask them at the end of it to take a moment and just notice, imagine what it feels like to not have to carry that trauma, that belief, that emotion around right now. Just notice what it feels like to have put it in the container, to let it go for a moment, to not have to be feeling that, remembering that. So the container resource can really be empowering and really simple, and help somebody feel a sense of control over their feelings, their trauma, their memories. Some of the other common resources include the light stream and the spiral technique. So the light stream, basically, we would ask a client to identify some sort of upsetting sensation that they're noticing in their body. Maybe the client is noticing tension in their chest, and we would ask them some questions about it. When you focus on that tension in your chest, what texture does it have? Is it rough? Is it spiky? Is it blurry? What color is it? What temperature is it? If it had a sound, is it a high pitch or a low pitch sound? We'll ask all these different questions about the shape and the size of that sensation. Then we'll ask a client to identify some sort of color that they associate with healing, and to take a moment and to imagine a beam of light coming from above them. This is where we would utilize whatever the client's belief system is, coming from God, coming from the universe, coming from the sun, just coming from seemingly nowhere, or the cosmos, and coming right through the top of your head, through your entire body, through the place in your chest where that upsetting and disturbing sensation is, that tension. And just notice what happens as that healing light moves through you and moves through that stress and that tension in your body. And during this, we would have the client engage in some form of bilateral stimulation. So this is called the light stream technique. It's very simple. The spiral technique is also quite simple, and it's somewhat similar. In the spiral technique, we would ask the client to identify some sort of body sensation that they're noticing that's upsetting. And let's just use the same example of tension in the chest. And we would ask the client to focus in on that stress, that tension, that sensation in their chest, and to imagine that stress is spinning in one direction, and to notice which direction it's spinning in. And then we would ask the client to intentionally take that spinning spiral and reverse it, and to have it spin in the opposite direction. Pretend that the energy, the tornado, the cyclone within you, in that stress, is spinning in the opposite direction. And during this, we're applying bilateral stimulation. And we would ask the client just to notice what they experience when that spiral starts to spin in the opposite direction. So again, very simple technique, almost like we're untangling and reversing the tangled emotions and stress in the body. Oftentimes, this will lead to a quick and simple desensitization or reduction in stress within somebody's body. Now, there's also a handful of other types of EMDR resources. For example, we might ask a client if there's a specific type of quality or strength or value that they feel like they need more of in order to heal from trauma. And perhaps they say, courage. I need more courage. And then we might ask the client to identify a moment in their life when they were courageous, or somebody else or something else that could symbolize or demonstrate or represent courage for them. And just like the other resources, we would ask them questions about it to really tap into that resource or that memory, and then apply bilateral stimulation while having them replay that moment of courage or tap into that resource associated with courage. We also can be really creative and tailor resources to whatever the client wants or needs, or whatever the nature of the trauma is. For example, I once had a client who experienced a really horrific traumatic loss, and I tried everything. We did EMDR resourcing, we did EMDR reprocessing. We got the memory down to like a 2 out of 10 in disturbance, but there still was this disturbing image associated with it. And it was specifically the person that had died in the memory. And it was not someone that the client knew, it was a stranger. And out of my uncertainty of what to do next, because I couldn't get the memory to become less disturbing, I said to the client, if there was some other resource that we had or that you had in that moment, what is it that would, anything in the world or anything imaginary, anyone, anything, what could help you make this a little less disturbing? Is it an object? Is it another person? What is it? And the client thought for a moment, and he said, a blanket. I said, well, what's the blanket for? Why do you need a blanket? And he said, in the aftermath of this horrific trauma, it felt like we just needed to put a blanket over the body of the person that died to cover them up so that they could rest peacefully now. And I thought, man, that is perfect. So simple, so, of course, easier done than said, but such a simple resource that I certainly wouldn't have thought of if I hadn't have just asked the client what resource he needed. And then I had him apply bilateral stimulation and imagine respectfully covering the body with a blanket, which he did, and then the disturbance dropped again. So there's really an infinite number of EMDR resources that we can call on and utilize. And they're really meant to be resources that we tap into with the therapist in the session, and then we go and practice on our own in between sessions. So with the clients I work with, I actually tell them that now that we've identified this as a resource, I need you to show me that you can utilize this in between sessions. That when you feel upset, or you feel anxious, or you feel sad, or you can't sleep, or you have a craving to get high, or you feel triggered, I need you to show me that you can utilize this coping skill, this resource, to regulate your emotions. So these resources end up becoming really empowering for the client, really stabilizing and regulating, and they allow us to safely move into EMDR processing because we know now that the client has coping skills and resources in case for when we tap into some more disturbing memories and difficult emotions and feelings. Sometimes we will even use the EMDR resources in the processing and bring the resource into the memory to change it. For example, with the client I mentioned who uses the circle of tigers surrounding him as a protective resource, in a processing session with the client where we were focused on a specific traumatic memory that related to a lack of safety. At one point, we were running out of time and the disturbance of the memory was still, in a moderate level. It had decreased a bit, but it was still somewhat disturbing. I asked the client to choose one of the resources that could help them in the memory and to imagine bringing that resource right into the traumatic memory and seeing what happens. And so the client took the tigers right into his traumatic memory and imagined the memory becoming something different by having these tigers there to protect him. And the disturbance on the memory significantly dropped. So the EMDR resources can help us in EMDR processing more quickly move towards resolution and desensitization, or really help us if we get stuck and we're blocked and the standard protocol isn't working. The EMDR resourcing by itself can be really empowering, can be really healing. I've had clients where we haven't even done any reprocessing. All we've done is resourcing, and they're already experiencing profound change. EMDR processing is something that not everybody is quite ready for. that it could actually be harmful to move forward into too quickly. However, EMDR resourcing is something that anybody could benefit from. And if it's approached carefully, thoughtfully, I believe that anybody can find some EMDR resources. Maybe not a resource in every one of the categories I outlined, but at least one of those categories could find a helpful resource for themselves. So if you wanted to learn more about EMDR processing and other aspects of EMDR, I would encourage you to check out some of the other videos on this channel and subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified when new videos are released. Go ahead and write in the comments and let us know, what's your favorite EMDR resource if you've been through EMDR resourcing as a client or as an EMDR therapist? Which one do you feel like would be most effective and most helpful? Or was there a resource that you used that I forgot to mention in EMDR?